A heavy mist rises from the floor of an empty, silent world. The ground here is not green, through the making of the world, so we can get to the real drama of human failure. But ancient literature does not work that way. They reach for the branch. They bite the flesh of the fruit. They swallow the lie, and the harmony violently shatters. The sweet juice turns to ash in their mouths. The cool evening breeze suddenly feels like ice against naked skin. They hear the heavy, terrifying sound of footsteps crushing the dry leaves, and they run into the thicket. The dust tries to hide from the breath. When Yahweh Elohim speaks the consequences of their rebellion in Genesis chapter 3, he does not invent a new punishment. He simply states the tragic math of what they have just done. He points them straight back to the soil. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground. Since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. This decree is not a vindictive spell. It is a biological diagnosis. You wanted independence. You wanted autonomy. You wanted to be the architect of your own universe. But a god does not bleed. A god does not sweat under a blistering sun. A god does not require water from the soil to survive. You are Adam. You are made of the Adamah. When the wet clay cuts itself off from the breath of the potter, only the dirt remains. Every word is a loaded spring. Every physical detail is a theological argument. To understand the tragedy of the human condition, you cannot start. The unmaking begins immediately. The ground hardens. The dirt resists the plow. Thorns push their sharp, bitter hooks through the crust of the earth. The work of cultivation becomes a grueling, backbreaking war of attrition. Humanity will now spend its days sweating over the very material it is made of, trying to force the cursed ground to yield enough food to keep the body alive for one more day. It is a vicious, inescapable cycle. The blood pumps through the veins. The hands dig into the dirt. The sweat drips onto the soil. And eventually, the heart stops. The breath leaves the lungs. The moisture evaporates. The body lowers into a shallow grave, returning to the exact red earth it was pulled from. On the sixth day, dust to dust, ash to ash, mud to mud. The story could have ended right there. It could have been nothing more than a failed experiment. A tragic glitch, drying up in a cursed field. A fleeting moment where the dirt walked, rebelled, and collapsed. But thousands of years later, another man walks into a garden. The olive branches hang heavy in the dark. The air is thick with the biting cold of a Judean spring night. And the silence of the Garden of Gethsemane is broken only by the sound of a single man gasping for breath. Jesus kneels in the dirt, with the fruit in chapter 3. You cannot start with the serpent. You cannot even start with the garden. The place to start is the dust. He does not stand tall like a defiant, untouchable deity. He falls on his face, pressing his forehead into the very soil his ancestors were pulled from. He feels the grit of the sediment against his skin. The terrifying weight of the impending cross crushes his body, like the heavy stone of the olive press resting just a few yards away. The capillaries in his sweat glands rupture under the immense, suffocating pressure of a cosmos deeply fractured by rebellion. He begins to sweat, but the moisture rolling down his face is not the normal sweat of agricultural labor. The physician Luke records that his sweat becomes like great drops of blood falling to the ground. The warm, thick fluid drips from his brow. It falls from his chin. It hits the cold, dry dust of the garden floor. The dam falls into the Adamah. The red blood soaks into the red earth. The ancient imagery comes full circle in the shadows of the olive trees. The hands that once gathered the wet clay to form the first man are now bound in human flesh, digging into the dirt in agony. The infinite God, who breathed the neshama into the empty lungs of the mud, is now gasping for oxygen in the damp night air. This is not a random biological reaction to stress. It is a deliberate, staggering reversal. The hands press into the mire. They gather the heavy, cold clay, scooping it from the saturated ground. The voice that just shattered. Think back to the decree in Eden. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food, until you return to the ground. That was the tragic sentence pronounced over humanity. But here, the true and better human enters the cursed field to settle the account. The first Adam stood upright in a perfect garden, reached out his hand to take from a tree, and brought the curse of sweat and death down upon the soil. The second Adam falls to his knees in a dark garden, prepares his hands to be nailed to a tree, and bleeds directly into the cursed dirt to buy it back. The ground cries out for its payment, and the maker of the ground pays it himself. When he rises from the dust of Gethsemane, his face is stained with the same red mud that coated his hands at the dawn of creation. He walks out of the grove, willingly stepping toward the violent death that will lower his own body into a rock-hewn tomb. The breath will leave his lungs. His physical form will rest perfectly still in the cold darkness of the earth, mimicking the silent clay of Genesis chapter 2. But the grave cannot digest the one who invented the dust. 3 days later, the breath returns. The man gets up, he walks out of the tomb, inaugurating a brand new creation that will never again face the curse of the thorns. The cosmic void with light is now completely silent. The work here is quiet. It is deliberate. It is deeply, intimately tactile. Yet, despite the garden being reclaimed, so many of us still live as if we are trapped under the blazing sun of Eden's exile. We spend our entire lives fighting a quiet, desperate war against our own limitations, chasing a phantom that is slowly tearing us apart. We live in a culture completely terrified of its own limitations. We exist in a relentless, exhausting pursuit of the infinite, driven by an empire that sells us the exact same lie the serpent whispered in the shadows of those ancient trees. You can be limitless. You can dictate your own reality. You can transcend the ground. So we swallow capsules of synthetic vitamins, stare at the glaring blue light of our screens late into the night, and drink bitter, chemical-laced caffeine just to force our eyes to stay open a little longer. We track our sleep cycles on vibrating digital watches and optimize our morning routines to squeeze blood from the stone of our schedules. We treat our physical frames like biological machines that just need the right software update to run forever. We are trying to hack our way out of the dirt. But the human body cannot be hacked into divinity. You can ingest all the serums and read all the productivity manuals in the world. But eventually, the dust demands a rest. The heavy ache in your bones at the end of a long week is not a failure of productivity. It is a confession of your origin. The Creator is kneeling in the dirt, acting as a potter, shaping a form out of the very ground that was just watered by the mist. You are Adam. You are a creature of the Adamah. The fact that you require 8 hours of unconscious, paralyzed vulnerability every single night, just to keep your mind from fracturing, is a built-in humbler. You have to consume the physical produce of the soil, the grain, the water, the meat, every few hours, or your stomach will contract and your body will literally begin to consume itself. Your dependence is absolute. Your fragility is woven into the very fabric of your cellular structure. This is the profound tension of the human experience. We carry the breath of the eternal, but we carry it in a vessel of wet sand. And our deepest anxieties, our most crippling burnouts, happen when we confuse the two. We try to be the breath, forgetting we are only the dirt. We try to be sovereign over our time, over our futures, over the people around us. We try to step back into the shoes of Elohim, attempting to manage the outcomes of a universe we were never designed to uphold. We carry the crushing weight of tomorrow, forgetting that the soil was only ever built to hold the grace of today. To accept your name is to accept your limits. It is to look at the fragile, aging, tired vessel you live in and realize that the Creator does not demand you to be infinite. He never asked the clay to be iron. He never asked the mud to hold. The light was spoken. The oceans were spoken. The stars were flung into the terrifying expanse of space by the sheer force of a vocal command up the sky. He only asked the dirt to stay close to the potter. And when you finally stop fighting your own fragility, when you let the dust simply be dust. The entire narrative of the text changes its weight. The infinite God knelt in the wet mud, and a dirt creature was given a name. He breathed his own life into empty lungs, and the red clay became a living soul. The earthling reached for a tree to become a deity, and the soil was cursed with thorns. The sweat dripped onto the broken ground, and humanity learned the crushing weight of its own fragility. The second Adam fell on his face, in a dark garden, and his blood soaked the earth to buy it back. The maker of the world was buried in a rock-hewn tomb, and the grave could not digest him. He walked out of the dust on the third day, and the endless cycle of the curse was finally broken. Same dirt, same breath. One magnificent story. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the absolute proximity of it all. He did not stand in the heavens and shout the human into existence like he did the stars. He bent down. He put his hands in the heavy, red sludge. The God of the cosmos chose to get his hands dirty, pressing his face close to the cold soil. But this creature is different. The mud is gathered. The limbs are shaped. But to understand why the Creator's hands breathe life into the very thing that would one day break his heart. If you are in a season where your limitations feel like a personal failure, where your body aches, and your mind is completely exhausted from trying to hold your entire universe together, Genesis chapter 2 is a place to breathe. You do not have to be infinite. You are Adam. The potter never asked the clay to hold up the sky. He never asked the mud to govern tomorrow. He only asks the dust to stay close to his hands. And may the God who has never once been afraid of the dirt walk with you through yours and remind you that your fragile frame is still held by the breath that changes everything. Are suddenly covered in red dirt. You have to look at the rhythm of the page that came right before. Read the first chapter of the Bible. Watch the pattern. God speaks. Light breaks. God speaks. Water separates. God speaks. Land emerges. God speaks. Forests erupt. It is cracked, arid, and waiting for cultivation. A vast expanse of deep red earth stretching to the unbroken horizon. No rain has fallen. God speaks. Stars ignite. It is a rhythmic, untouchable liturgy. 6 days of absolute, effortless sovereignty. A universe spoken into existence without breaking a sweat. The elements do not resist. The chaos submits to the voice. It is clean. It is infinite. It is distant. The Creator stands above the void, orchestrating the cosmos with the sheer force of sound. The terrifying expanse of space responds to a single syllable. But turn the page to chapter 2. The liturgy stops. The rhythm shatters. The distance collapses. The camera violently drops out of the stratosphere and lands in a barren field. There is no grass. There is no rain. There is just a heavy mist seeping up from beneath the rocks, turning the dirt into thick sludge. He does not command the man to simply appear. He does not order the ground to produce a human, the way he ordered it to produce fruit trees. He does not shout across the void. He bends down. In Genesis chapter 1, the Hebrew text uses the name Elohim, the deity of terrifying, unapproachable cosmic power. But here in chapter 2, the text introduces a new, compounded name, Yahweh Elohim, the personal, covenantal God, the God who enters the frame. Elohim speaks galaxies. Yahweh gets his hands dirty. Look at the rest of the living creatures. In chapter 1, the text says, the earth brought forth animals. A collective emergence, a broad stroke of the brush, but the human is singular. No human footsteps have yet broken the crust of the soil. But as the vapor lifts from the subterranean depths, it soaks the dry dirt, painstakingly formed, built from the ground up, grain by grain. The narrative slows to a crawl. The infinite God reduces his focus to a single patch of wet earth. This shift in the text is not a clumsy splice by ancient editors. It is a shocking revelation of character. The creation of humanity is not a spoken decree. It is a hands-on craft. It requires proximity. It requires the Creator to touch the creation, to feel the grit of the sediment, to work the heavy clay until it is pliable. The text wants you to watch the divine hands, pack the soil, shape the limbs, and mold the features. There is an intimacy here that nothing else in the entire cosmos receives. And yet, there is a profound humility embedded right into the center of this intimacy, because the specific name of that red clay is about to define the destiny of every human being who will ever walk the earth. The Creator traces the line of a jawbone through the wet sludge. The smell of damp minerals and soaked rock hangs heavy in the silent air. The red earth yields to the divine pressure, staining the fingers that shape it. He does not use gold pulled from a riverbed. He does not use silver or the raw, burning elements of a dying star. He uses the cheapest, most fragile, most common material available in the barren wasteland. The red dust turns dark. It turns heavy. It becomes mud. And then, a pair of hands reach down into the wet clay. He uses dirt. He forms the rib cage, hollowing out a space in the mud that is currently completely empty. He sculpts the arms, folding the wet soil into hands that will one day dig right back into the very same ground. The narrative slows down to the deliberate, methodical pace of a master potter, emphasizing the sheer physicality of what is happening. The infinite God is hovering over a pile of mud, making a body that is utterly tethered to the soil beneath it. Look at the heavy, dark shape lying there on the ground. This is not a creature constructed from heavenly light. It is a sculpture of terrestrial dust. At this exact moment in the narrative, the human is completely indistinguishable from the field it rests upon. It has no pulse. It has no warmth. It has no consciousness. If the sun were to break through the mist right now, and if a hot wind were to blow hard enough, the moisture would evaporate. The form would simply dry out, crack, and scatter back across the wasteland, becoming nothing more than blowing topsoil once again. There is a massive paradox built into the very ribs of this creature. It is the pinnacle of the creation narrative, the final masterpiece of the week, the being designed to rule the earth. Most people read the opening chapters of Genesis and assume they know the protagonist. They read the word Adam in their English translations, and yet it is made of the lowest substance the earth has to offer. The maker sits back and looks at the wet clay resting on the ground. And the text gives this earthen figure a title. We read that title in English, and we immediately capitalize the first letter, turning it into a proper noun. We treat it like a traditional first name. But the ancient audience listening to this story by a fire in the wilderness did not hear a formal name. They heard a pun. They heard a profound linguistic mirror, reflecting the exact material the creature was just carved from. To hear what they heard, you have to open the original Hebrew text of Genesis, chapter 2. Verse 7. Open your English translation to Genesis chapter 2. Verse 7. It reads like a straightforward historical summary. Then the Lord God formed man of dust from the ground. The Hebrew word translated as man in that sentence is the word Adam, and the word translated as ground is the word Adamah. When the ancient Hebrews heard this passage, they did not hear a formal noun. They heard a profound, poetic pun. Adam from the Adamah, the earthling from the earth, the dirt creature from the dirt. It is a linguistic mirror that reflects the exact material the creature is made from. If hearing the raw, tactile weight of the original language is making these ancient texts come alive for you, you're exactly who this channel is for, and they think of it as a proper noun. A first name printed on a cosmic birth certificate. A simpla, arbitrary label assigned to the first man. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the language itself physically tethers the human to the soil. But the etymology goes even deeper into our anatomy. If you peel back the letters of the root words sitting inside both Adam and Adamah, you find the two-letter Hebrew noun dam, and dam literally translates to blood. It is the linguistic root that gives the iron-rich soil of the ancient Middle East its deep, dark red color. The first human is not just formed from generic dirt. He is formed from the red, blood-colored earth, The very name of humanity carries both the color of the mud and the pulse of the veins. The ancient mind understood that blood is the currency of life. Later in the biblical narrative, the book of Leviticus will declare that the life of a creature is literally in its blood, its dam. So to be Adam is to be a vessel of red blood, pulled from the red soil. That root connection changes everything about how we view ourselves in the biblical story. Adam is not a badge of cosmic superiority, to distinguish him from the rest of creation. But if you step back into the ancient Hebrew mind, if you look closely at the raw material, it is a confession of absolute dependence. The text is brutally honest about our fragility. You are Adam, formed from the Adamah, filled with dam. You are animated red dust. You are a fragile vessel of soil that requires constant maintenance, constant water, and constant grace just to keep from drying out and blowing away in the harsh desert wind. The Hebrew language refuses to let humanity forget our posture. We are not ethereal spirits trapped in a physical shell. We are the ground itself, invited to walk. But wet mud and red earth are not enough to make a living soul. Something else has to enter the dirt. The red clay rests perfectly still on the ground. It has a face, but it cannot see. It has a mouth, but it cannot speak. It has a chest, but there is no rhythm beating against the wet ribs. The Creator kneels in the soil. He leans over the heavy, dark sculpture. He brings his face down to the mud. This is the most shocking image in the ancient world. If you read the creation myths of the surrounding nations, the texts of Babylon, of Egypt, of Canaan, the gods create humans from a safe distance. They create them out of violence, using the blood of slain monsters, being gathered in those divine hands. You realize something profound has been lost in translation. Adam is not a label. It is an origin story. They create them to be disposable slaves. Designed to do the heavy agricultural lifting, the gods are too lazy to do themselves. The pagan gods stay in the heavens and shout orders at the dirt. But Yahweh Elohim is face to face with the soil, the infinite God of the cosmos, the voice that just commanded light to shatter the cosmic void, places his mouth against the cold, red earth, and he exhales. He breathes into the nostrils of the clay. The breath is not just oxygen, it is his own essence. The Hebrew text calls it the neshama, a breath that carries the intimate, personal life force of the breather. The warm air hits the empty lungs. The red earth suddenly flushes with heat. The iron-rich mud transforms into beating tissue, pumping dam through newly formed veins. The chest rises. The dust opens its eyes. The dirt is no longer just dirt. It is a living soul. The first thing the man sees is the face of his maker. The first thing he feels is the wind of God expanding in his chest. He stands up in the wet grass. He is a walking paradox. He is tethered to the ground beneath his feet by his Adamah, made of the very same fragile minerals as the rocks and the trees. But he is tethered to the heavens by the neshama. It is a word dripping with the wet, red mud of the earth itself. Most people assume the Genesis account is just a fast forward, filled with a capacity to reason, to name, to worship, to love. He is dirt that carries the breath of God. He is mud that holds the infinite. This is not a biological accident. It is a masterpiece of tension. As the man walks through the garden, every beat of his heart is a borrowed exhale. Every breath he takes in the cool morning air is a continuation of that first intimate transfer of life. The mud and the breath hold together in perfect harmony. The fragile earthen vessel does not crack, because it remains close to the potter who shaped it. It is a beautiful, flawless design. But the design only works if the earth remembers it, is earth. And the tragedy of the human story begins the moment the dust decides it wants to be a god. Look at the temptation in the garden. It is not about a piece of fruit. It is about altitude. The serpent slithers up to the earthen creatures and whispers a very specific lie. He tells the dust that it can be divine. He tells the atom that he does not need to be tethered to the Adamah. He can rise above it. He can dictate his own reality. He can sever the cord of dependence and become a god. The serpent speaks. The woman listens. The man stands entirely silent.